It started with a sideline argument. Cameras caught Sanders and a teammate locked in a heated exchange, frustration leaking out in full view. Cleveland had just collapsed in a game riddled with special teams blunders and avoidable mistakes. It looked like the kind of day that could unravel a rookie quarterback. But what happened next flipped the story. At the post-game podium, Sanders faced the fire and extinguished it with clarity, poise, and something most rookies haven't learned: control of the narrative. That press conference became more than a moment. It became a measuring stick. Sanders' responses, clear-eyed, reflective, and mature, weren't just a defense mechanism.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
They were a blueprint for how to lead amid turmoil. In that 10-minute window, he separated himself from the noise, from the excuses, and from the rookie label. 4 NFL teams watching, that's not just rare, it's leadership in real time. And it may be the clearest sign yet that Sanders is wired for greatness. There are moments in sports that don't need a last-second touchdown or a viral highlight to leave a mark. Sometimes it's the silence between questions. The way a player answers without deflection. The way he takes responsibility without dodging. That's exactly what happened when Shedeur Sanders faced the press after a brutal loss with the Cleveland Browns. No theatrics. No sugarcoating. Just truth. At 22 years old in his rookie season, Sanders stood behind a mic and addressed everything. Critics, offensive struggles, a sideline blow-up with a teammate. And he didn't do it with spin. He didn't hide behind rookie mistakes or the usual cliches about growing pains. He laid it all out. With composure. With maturity. With a tone that made it clear. This wasn't about saving face. This was about owning the moment. And that's why this went viral. That's why it turned heads not just in Cleveland but across the entire NFL. In a league where young quarterbacks are often protected, overly managed, and told to stick to the script, Sanders broke that mold. He didn't talk in circles. He talked like someone who already knows what the weight of leadership feels like. Someone who understands that being a franchise quarterback isn't just about arm strength, it's about accountability. Especially when things are falling apart. The Browns weren't just dealing with a tough loss. They were dealing with a complete breakdown. Special teams errors. Questionable coaching decisions. Injuries. Players out of sync. Miscommunication everywhere. And as the chaos built, the cameras caught a moment. Sanders exchanging heated words with Jerry Jeudy on the sideline. That's all it took. Headlines wrote themselves. Locker room tension. Fracture in the Browns. The narrative was teed up, ready to... But then Sanders stepped in and rewrote it. When asked about the altercation, he didn't downplay it. He didn't shift blame. He acknowledged the frustration and redirected the focus back where it belonged, on the team, the execution, the need to get things right. It was a textbook example of emotional intelligence. The kind of professionalism you typically only see from seasoned vets. And that's what made this so striking. The raw composure. The level-headed response to criticism. The way he articulated the issues, not just from a personal angle but from a systems-level view. He didn't say players weren't trying. He said they weren't in the right spots. That what was happening on the field didn't reflect what was practiced. That disconnect? That's not about individual talent. That's about structure. About communication. And about preparation. That's the kind of diagnosis you don't usually hear from someone this early in their NFL career. But that's what Shedeur Sanders is bringing to the table. He's not just surviving adversity. He's naming it. He's not letting the moment swallow him. He's controlling the narrative and showing every player in that locker room what it looks like to lead through chaos, not just during a win streak. And that's exactly why veterans like Myles Garrett are backing him. Garrett didn't just offer support. He underlined the bigger message. That this is what leadership should look like. That ownership isn't optional. That even the young guys, especially the young guys, need to step up and set a tone. Because for years, that's what Cleveland has lacked. Not just talent, they've had flashes of that. But accountability. Real, unshakable leadership that doesn't flinch when the pressure hits. And let's be clear, the pressure was on. After that loss, it would have been easy for Sanders to deflect. To say it was on the coaches, the play calling, the injuries. To let the moment slip by with some generic answers and avoid the backlash. But he didn't. He leaned into it. He took every question head on. He didn't just show accountability, he embodied it. And that's why this press conference matters. That's why it's being replayed, analyzed, and talked about across the league. Because when you strip away the noise, what you're left with is a young quarterback showing every trait teams dream about when they draft a leader. Mental toughness, self-awareness, clarity, composure. And in a city like Cleveland, where quarterbacks have come and gone like seasons, this kind of response signals something different. Something real. Something that might actually. The Browns have long been defined by instability. They've drafted for upside. They've made splashy trades. But what's been missing is sustainability. Culture. A sense of direction that doesn't reset every 2 years. And that's what Sanders brings, not just as a player but as a presence. This isn't about polish. This is about principle. About how you respond when your team underdelivers. About what you say when the easy thing would be to stay silent. And in that moment, Shedeur Sanders made it clear. He's not interested in protecting egos or managing optics. He's interested in winning. And winning long-term doesn't start with highlight reels. It starts with telling the truth. So what happens next? That's on the Browns. Because now they've seen it. They've seen what kind of leader they've got. What kind of quarterback is actually wearing the jersey. And the question isn't whether Shedeur Sanders is built for this. It's whether the organization is built to support someone like him. Because leadership like this? It demands alignment. It demands support. If the communication problems aren't addressed, if the preparation gaps don't get fixed, if the structure doesn't rise to the level of the leadership, it'll crumble. And that can't fall on Sanders' shoulders alone. He's doing his part. The question now is, will Cleveland do theirs? Because for once, they don't have to guess if their quarterback has it. He just showed the entire world he does. He showed it by facing the toughest moment of his young career and turning it into a case study on what it means to be a true professional. And it didn't take a winning stat line. It didn't take a comeback drive. It took telling the truth when no one else wanted to. That's how change starts. And now all eyes are on Cleveland. Will the front office step up and clean up the system Sanders is calling out? Will the coaching staff close the communication gaps? Will the rest of the roster buy into the standard that's just been set by a 22-year-old rookie? Or will this become yet another almost story for the Browns? Right now they've got something rare. Something that doesn't come around every draft cycle. A player who can lead with both his talent and his character. Who can see the flaws in the machine and still be willing to fix it from the inside out. That's a franchise quarterback. And not just in talent but in temperament. So let us know where you stand. Are you seeing what NFL teams are seeing? Do you believe Shedeur Sanders has what it takes to change the culture in Cleveland? Or do you think the Browns are going to waste the best chance they've had in years? Drop a comment. Share this with someone who still doesn't believe in leadership over hype. Hit that like button if you respect the players who tell the truth, even when it's hard. And subscribe if you're watching this story unfold like the rest of us, because this is no longer just about potential. It's about purpose. And Shedeur Sanders? He's giving Cleveland a reason to believe that this time, just maybe, it could be different. It could be different, but will it? That's the question everyone's asking now. Because what Shedeur Sanders showed after that game wasn't just poise, it was a challenge. A wake-up call to an organization that's been stuck in a loop for the better part of 2 decades. Quarterbacks come in with all the right tools, all the potential in the world, and leave with nothing to show for it but a bruised reputation and a spot on that cursed list of names on the back of a Browns fan's jersey. The league has seen it too many times. Talent goes to waste in Cleveland not because the players didn't want it, but because the system couldn't hold them. But then Shedeur Sanders showed up. And for the first time in a long time, someone didn't just flash promise, he showed actual leadership. He didn't just play through adversity. He explained it, diagnosed it, took responsibility for it, and still managed to inspire confidence without deflecting blame or downplaying the problems. Think about that. Think about how rare that is. When a rookie quarterback faces the kind of loss the Browns just took, a loss defined by miscommunication, special teams failures, and a sideline incident that could have easily turned into a full-blown scandal, what's the usual response? You get vague, canned answers. You get, we're going to watch the film, and we'll get better, and we just have to execute. But Shedeur? He didn't hide behind buzzwords. He told the truth. He said what everyone already knew but hadn't heard from inside the locker room. That players weren't in the right spots. That there were clear breakdowns in execution. That this wasn't just about effort, it was about preparation. About systems. About the kind of stuff no stat sheet will ever show. And then he took responsibility for it. Not in a performative way, not in a look at me being a leader way. But in a real way. The kind that holds weight in a locker room. The kind that makes veterans listen. The kind that makes coaches rethink how they're preparing their team. Because if the rookie is the one holding the standard, then what's everyone else doing? That's the question his press conference asked without ever saying it directly. It's also why the moment went viral. Not because he yelled. Not because he cried. Not because he gave a fiery speech. But because he was calm. Measured. Controlled. He spoke like someone who'd been here before. Someone who understood what being the face of a franchise actually means. And let's not forget, this is a guy who, before even playing a snap in the NFL, carried immense weight on his shoulders. Not just as Deion Sanders' son, not just as a high-profile draft pick, but as the quarterback expected to help fix Cleveland. And instead of running from that pressure, he's walking into it like it's part of the job. That's why this moment matters. It's not just about optics. It's about identity. It's about a young player deciding that the excuses stop with him, even if the problems didn't start with him. And that's the energy Cleveland hasn't had in years. Because let's be honest, the Browns have had talented quarterbacks. They've had first-rounders. They've had high expectations. What they haven't had is someone who walks into the building and holds everyone to a higher standard. Someone who doesn't need to be asked to lead. Someone who just does it. That's what Shedeur Sanders is doing. And whether or not the organization rises to meet that moment is going to define the next decade of Browns football. Because they have a choice now. They can either build around Sanders the right way, address the systemic issues he pointed out, invest in communication, clean up the game day chaos, and support him with a coaching staff that matches his level of clarity, or they can let it slip through their fingers like they have so many times before. And if they do? If they let this guy fade into the same purgatory that's claimed the careers of so many others in Cleveland? That's not on him. He already showed he's got the mental toughness, the professionalism, the leadership. The only question left is whether the Browns can keep up. Because what Shedeur did in that press conference wasn't just rare, it was NFL-level leadership on full display. The kind of leadership that teams build entire cultures around. The kind that doesn't just win games, it changes narratives. And that's what he's already doing. Changing how people talk about Cleveland. About young quarterbacks. About what it means to lead when everything around you is crumbling. He turned what should have been a controversy into a teachable moment. He took a loss and turned it into a rallying cry. Not with words of inspiration, but with truth. With accountability. With calm under fire. You think NFL execs didn't notice that? They absolutely did. This league is obsessed with control. With polish. With managing optics. But every so often, a player comes along who breaks through all of that. Not by being loud, but by being authentic. And Shedeur just showed that kind of authenticity is still what cuts through in the NFL. He wasn't trying to go viral. He was just being honest. And that's exactly why it went viral in the first place. Because fans are tired of fake leadership. They're tired of the PR answers. They're tired of watching young quarterbacks get thrown into bad situations and then blamed when it all goes wrong. What they saw in Shedeur Sanders was different. They saw someone who cares. Someone who gets it. Someone who's already proving he has the head and heart to be the future of a franchise. If the franchise is willing to meet him halfway. And that's where it lands now. Not on him. On them. The Browns have something special. But potential doesn't last forever. Composure can crack under constant pressure. Leadership can only carry a team so far if it's not supported. So what Cleveland does next will say everything about whether they're ready to break the cycle. Will they back the quarterback who just showed more maturity than most veterans? Or will they keep doing what they've always done, hoping talent alone is enough to fix a broken system? We've seen how that story ends. This time, though, the story could be different. It should be different. Because Shedeur Sanders has already written the first chapter the right way. He's done the hard part, proving he has what it takes. Now the Browns have to decide whether they want to be the organization that finally gets it, and the statement was this: I'm not here to play along with the dysfunction. I'm here to change it. That message, subtle, measured, but unmistakable, hit harder than any touchdown. Shedeur Sanders didn't throw anyone under the bus, didn't launch into a sermon about culture or demand a rebuild. He didn't need to. All he had to do was tell the truth. Speak plainly. Take ownership where it mattered. That alone, in the current NFL environment, is revolutionary. And that's exactly what caught the attention of so many teams, coaches, and analysts around the league. Because the NFL is filled with noise. Social media blow-ups, viral locker room drama, players giving sound bites just controversial enough to trend but safe enough to not get fined. What we rarely get anymore, especially from young players, is clarity. No filters. No scripted narratives. Just the calm, direct truth from someone who understands the moment. That's what Shedeur delivered. And in doing so, he didn't just flip the script on a bad Browns loss, he flipped the way people perceive him. All it took was 5 minutes behind a podium. 5 minutes where he could have fumbled the moment. Where he could have blamed play calling, deflected to teammates, or simply offered hollow "we'll bounce back" quotes. But instead, he did the one thing that's hardest to do when your team's falling apart. He accepted the responsibility. And more than that, he meant it. You could hear it in the way he spoke. It wasn't performative. It wasn't about getting ahead of the criticism. It was about setting a tone. And not just for the media. Not even for the fans. For his teammates. Because when you're in a locker room full of veterans, and the rookie quarterback steps up and holds himself accountable for problems that aren't even fully his fault, that gets respect. That gets attention. That builds trust. And that trust is what turns a rookie into a leader, and eventually into the guy. This is exactly why someone like Myles Garrett didn't hesitate to publicly back him. Garrett knows what it looks like when leadership is missing. He's played through it. He's had to carry more than his fair share of the burden over the years. So when he sees a young player step up and take control, not just of his own narrative but of the team's direction, that's a moment worth amplifying. Garrett made it clear. Ownership starts now. Leadership doesn't wait until you've earned your stripes. And when someone like Shedeur Sanders grabs that responsibility this early, that's how cultures start to shift. The question now is whether the Browns' front office, coaching staff, and supporting cast can keep pace. Because as much as this moment was about Sanders proving he belongs, it was also about Cleveland facing a crossroads. The team has a quarterback who's already showing rare traits: emotional intelligence, leadership, and maturity under fire. That's not something you develop later. That's not something you teach. That's something you build around. But for Cleveland, building around a quarterback has never been the issue. It's been maintaining the momentum. Every time this franchise starts to look like it's turning the corner, something breaks. A coaching change. A bad front office decision. A locker room divide. Injuries. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the quarterback becomes the scapegoat. But Shedeur's not allowing that script to play out the same way. Because by taking responsibility so early and so confidently, he's doing something dangerous for the status quo. He's setting a standard. And once that standard is set, it's on everyone else to meet it. From the offensive line to the coaching staff to the front office. No more hiding behind the excuse of youth. No more shrugging off mistakes as part of the process. Sanders is showing what accountability looks like, and he's doing it before anyone asked him to. That's the kind of presence that changes organizations. And the NFL is paying attention. We're already hearing insiders talk about how Sanders' poise mirrors the early stages of some of the league's most respected quarterbacks. Not in playing style. Not in stat lines. In how they lead. In how they talk. In how they own bad moments without letting those moments define them. Because that's the difference between quarterbacks who last and those who fade. It's not just about having a great arm. It's about surviving the losses. Enduring the criticism. Being the same steady voice when things are ugly as you are when they're great. And if this press conference is any indication, Sanders has that part locked down. And fans? They're starting to believe it too. Not because he promised things would change, but because he acted like it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It was firm. Grounded. Real. And that kind of leadership doesn't just inspire confidence, it forces reflection. On what's been going wrong. On who's been held accountable. On why this team year after year finds ways to beat itself. Because Shedeur didn't just say, "We've got to execute better." He identified the exact issue: players not in the right spots. Plays not run the way they were practiced. That's not just post-game lip service. That's someone who's processing the loss through a leadership lens. And that's what makes this different. Because we've seen quarterbacks go viral for yelling at teammates on the sideline. For storming off the field. For emotional outbursts that get reframed as passion. But Shedeur didn't need to raise his voice. He let his presence do the work. He showed leadership in the moments after the failure, when it really counts. That's what franchise quarterbacks do. And that's why this moment matters so much, not just for Shedeur's legacy but for the Browns' future. Because this team has a window right now. A window to get serious, to listen, to adapt. To match the standard being set by a 22-year-old who isn't waiting to be told what leadership looks like, he's showing it. The only question is whether Cleveland as an organization can follow through. Will they fix the systemic issues Sanders has already pointed out? Will they stop patching the problems with empty slogans and start rebuilding the foundation? Will they support the quarterback who's already supporting them more than they probably deserve? Because if they don't, if they blow this, the league will remember. Not just because Shedeur Sanders went viral for telling the truth, but because he was willing to carry the weight of a franchise that's fumbled it more times than most teams have had the chance. And that's not something you see every day. Because that's the thing, no one can say they weren't warned. When Shedeur Sanders stepped in front of those cameras, fresh off a loss that laid bare every crack in the Browns system, he didn't hide behind PR lines. He didn't spin the story. He told the truth, calmly, clearly, publicly. And by doing so, he gave the entire franchise a mirror. Now the only question is whether they have the guts to look into it. Because what Sanders said wasn't just about one game. It wasn't about a sideline flare-up or broken coverage. It was about a pattern. One that has haunted this team for years. Talent on the roster. Momentum in spurts. And then, miscommunication. Mental mistakes. Missed opportunities. And while that used to be something fans screamed from the stands or ranted about online, it's now being said, with poise, by the most important voice on the team. This wasn't a meltdown. This wasn't finger-pointing. This was a young quarterback diagnosing the same issues that analysts and insiders have been whispering about for years, and doing it on the record. And that's exactly why NFL teams are watching. Not just because of what Sanders said, but how he handled it. Because that's what separates the guys who play the position from the ones who own it. And Sanders made it clear, he's not here to survive the NFL. He's here to lead it. But leadership is a two-way street. It's not just about what he brings to the table. It's about whether the Browns are finally ready to meet that level of leadership with real accountability, from the top down. Whether they're willing to overhaul the things Sanders is calling out, or just throw a fresh coat of paint on a cracked foundation. Because if they don't, it won't just be a failure of development, it'll be a failure of vision. A refusal to recognize what they have in front of them. A quarterback who gets it. Who wants the responsibility. Who's not afraid of the pressure that's already swallowed so many others who wore that jersey. And if Cleveland lets that go to waste, they won't be able to say they didn't see it coming. So tell us, is this it? Is Shedeur Sanders the culture shock Cleveland finally needed? Can the organization rise to the standard their rookie quarterback just set, or are they doomed to keep repeating the same tired mistakes? Comment your take below. If you respect players who lead with accountability over noise, hit that like button. Share this with someone who still thinks rookie means not ready. And subscribe if you want to follow the rise of the quarterback who might just change the narrative not only for the Browns, but for what leadership looks like in today's NFL. Because this wasn't just a press conference. It was a message. And now it's up to the Browns to listen.